Hello and welcome to the Monopath podcast. Today I'm speaking with Storm Bilton, who goes by the name Inktinkboy over on Instagram. We largely discussed his creative process and the inspiration for that process, and then a bit to do with tattoo art. It does make me wonder whether I should search out tattoo artists to speak to. Could be quite rewarding. I suppose you can let me know if somebody springs to mind to you. We spoke about signature today and how one imposes their own personal flair on the artwork that they generate, and how to identify what that is. So Storm goes into some detail about some of the things that he has noticed in his own work. And there's a rhetorical component to how I've just phrased that, because we also speak about the free will argument. So does a person have a choice about whether they create art? Do they choose to be an artist? Or does it simply happen? Is it a condition? And other than that, we coin a term together for prosaic art, which is when art is a little more contrived. And I said in the podcast that I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, and I really don't. Although I may have felt like it was a negative thing, I think it can be, but all I'm really trying to get at there is that there are two varieties of creation. One of them is purely subjective and just spills out, and there's another, something that doesn't begin with emotion, at least not one of your own emotions. Anyway, overall, very enlightening conversation. I feel like I learn tons every time I do one of these at the moment, and hopefully you're getting something out of it too. If you are, I don't advertise, I don't do anything like that, but you can head over to my website, a link for which is in the description, and you can donate and support in any way that you desire, but sharing this really with friends or recommending people that you think would get some value out of this, or people I should talk to. There's a number of ways that you can support what it is I'm trying to do here. So, without further ado, I bring you Storm Bilton. Storm, welcome to the podcast. I'm really keen to speak to people who have skills that I don't believe I do. When I was a lot younger, I used to be okay at sort of copying an image or replicating an image, like a photograph, and drawing it, like doing a line drawing of it. And I seem to have completely lost that skill as I've got older. I can't do it. Maybe it's a lack of rehearsal, I don't know. So I wanted to begin at least with your history, your personal history, I suppose. When is it you first started drawing? Maybe not professionally, but
I would say that I've always enjoyed like drawing, like painting, anything like physically, artistically, anything to do with that style of creativity and art. But whilst at school, I didn't actually study art, like as in high school. I didn't study it. I went down the route of drama. So I've definitely always been into creative, artistic things, but I definitely went through various stages of finding what my genre of art was. So didn't do it at school. I did drama, and then so I had it was more of a hobby, drawing, sketching, painting, anything like that. I went to college to study drama, and they put me on my the initial introduction day. They put me down for dance, and at the time, to look at my old self, I was definitely not the typical dancer to look at. I was very large. I was a large human, not that large people don't dance, but I can't dance. I've got 2 left feet, terrible. So literally, it was a spur of the moment, on the spot. I was like, all right, I'll have a look at art then, just art and design. So that is literally how my pathway into the world of like art, paper, that study of it, that's how it started. So it was literally a 5 second spur of the moment. Instead of going to an art lesson that was for dance and drama that wasn't for me, I just decided there and then that I was going to go into the actual art studio. And I loved it from then on. But
completely serendipitous.
yeah, literally, like I said, not studied it whatsoever at school. It were a hobby that I did at home, but I didn't have any. Obviously, at school, you experience like you learn the skill basis of art. I think you've definitely got to have the interest in it to begin with to do that kind of art. But you can definitely pick up skills along the way. So going into college with it, I had none of those skills background that a lot of the class that I was going to be joining, that I was going to be working alongside, they were definitely more advanced than me in that sense. Like for basic things, when it's down to like blending paint, blending pencils, I had none of that. It was literally so fresh to me. So I was catching up when it came to the skills. I had the imagination to create it, but actually putting it on paper to begin with was definitely hard. I definitely spent a lot of time beating myself up about it, which was a big thing to overcome.
No, I bet. Do you think there's a case to be made for you naturally or prenatally being an artist? Was it already there? Like you said, you've got the imagination you've got an artist's imagination. It was just a case of figuring how to apply that to a skill and how to develop it and how to learn it. But were you already an artist? You just didn't realize?
I would say so. I think I would say that it's definitely, I don't know if DNA is in the right word, because I've spoke about this with a lot of friends. Like in my family, like I would say that I am probably the most, without sounding big headed in that way at all, but I would say I am probably the most creative yet, or that I'm aware of, to come out of my family. Like my mum's she's got a wonderful like fashion sense and like interior design. Like the house is beautiful and definitely wacky. And I grew up in a very free house like that. She allowed me to do and try whatever I wanted to be. So I had it like that, but there's no musicians or other artists whatsoever that I'm aware of in my family. So when it comes down to prenatal, like you said, or being like, is it there? Are you meant to be it? I don't think it's something that's been passed through my family, but from being a small child, I have always definitely been creative and wanted to. I'm not very intelligent when it comes to like the maths or English. Like I enjoy writing poetry, so I think creative definitely comes up in a lot of things that I do, and I love reading poetry. But if somebody asked me to write a story, like my spelling and grammar, like my education on that side isn't there. Like I don't have that flair whatsoever. So I don't know if I don't know if you can have both. Maybe there probably is some people out there that are highly intelligent and creative, but mine just don't join. And I know that a lot of my artist like friends, they're also the same. They don't have the connection of both. They either excel in one or the other.
Yeah, I've seen a fairly common correlation between people with dyslexic, or is it dyscalculus, when
Yeah,
they struggle with the numbers. I see a large proportion of those sorts of people being more creative than people who
absolutely.
don't have them, or who are. And there's another thing with people who have things like autism, and where you're like, or you're more adept, or not, maybe not autism necessarily, although it could be.
My mum is a carer, obviously I can't speak too much about that, but personal experiences that my mum's had, and some of the young adults that she works with that do have learning difficulties, such as autism, they're outstanding artists. She tells me about a boy that she used to work with, and like it were a lot of like comic style things, but like unbelievable skill, like stuff that even I know that I don't have that flair of creativity to do anything like that, like outstanding, amazing art. But when it comes to say writing anything down to a simple sentence, that skill base isn't there. So
Yeah,
I think there is definitely a correlation there with that kind of thing.
I'm familiar with some of the the scientific literature on the brain and the difference between the two hemispheres. And commonly it's perceived that one of the hemispheres, the left hemisphere, is the language center. So that's the one where all of the words, all the language takes place. And the right hemisphere is commonly perceived as the one that doesn't do language. But I think all things seem to indicate at the moment that that's not quite right. And actually, the left is more analytical and more grasping and more precise. So it deals with looking at things that are in nature or that are natural for us to see and putting words around them. Whereas in the right hemisphere is a bit more open-ended and it doesn't focus so much on things. It's broader. The loose connection there is between the left hemisphere being very much to do with what I do as a philosopher, the written side of things, and the right hemisphere being more to do with creativity. It's a rough approximation of what's going on there, but the right hemisphere being a creative, artistic hemisphere.
Would you say then that somebody could have a almost even balance on both of those, or would you say that it would flare either way? I only say this because my dearest friend, my absolute best friend, I found him in college. I adore him, and he is an artist that I absolutely look up to. His work is unbelievable, and he wanted to do philosophy at university, but then ended up following an art course. And he's self-taught. I know that there's different variations of philosophy, so I don't know if there is just an art-based philosophy background, but he's totally self-educated on that side of philosophy, and it's unbelievable. Like his skill on like just writing it's unbelievable. So I don't know if you could find.
Yeah, well, I think of philosophy as something almost opposite to art, almost, but not completely. So we could get into some of that, I suppose. For me, philosophy and writing
Almost a
is
poet.
in two parts. You can do it poetically, and so you care more about the way the words look and the structure of the sentences, and you want it to be mellifluous and sound pretty and read well. And that's one side of doing anything, and that would be more to do with the right hemisphere, the kind of creative side of it. The other left hemisphere would be to be completely analytical, which would be to be more scientific about it, which is just to give the facts and to make concise statements that aren't very attractive or readable. It's just data.
The bare bones of it.
Yeah. And it's in the same way, I would say you can produce art with the same kind of divisions there. So you can produce art that is just beautiful and creative and unboundless. So for me, making music that is not really specific to a genre, and I try to be really personal with it and do my own thing. Or you could do and create art that is a bit more prosaic and a bit more to the point or for a specific effect. I actually think less of that kind of art. You know, if the art is created because they're trying to say something, they're going into the creation of the art by saying, this is what I'm going to do. I want to make this point. I see that a lot with politics and people making, say, movies to make political points. And this is just a personal comment, I suppose, but I don't enjoy those movies as much because the art seems to be diminished.
And it almost imprints what they want you to see and take from that. Yeah, I absolutely get your point with that. I think for me, art is something like if I go to an art museum, an art gallery, anything like that, I don't want to know what that art is supposed to have an effect on you or what you're meant to think. I think art is something that's totally unique and personal to every single passerby or every single person that would view it, or even the person making it. The reason that I might make a piece of art, the personal effect on that or the personal feelings around it would possibly, or to me in my head, will be reciprocated totally different to the viewer, if you know what I mean. So I think I try and keep my art very almost simple in the sense that not like simple to detail, but I mean simple so there's not too much in it that would be like, that's exactly what this means. It is, I want it to be an open view.
Yeah, there's something there that, for me, as somebody who is a purveyor of art and someone who enjoys it, there's something more pure in that, in the way that it's expressed. It feels less contrived. Maybe that's my primary jibe with the kind of art that I said I didn't really like, when it's a bit more prosaic, because it's too focused on indoctrinating people to believe a certain thing. And for me, I'm more like you, I think. I would prefer to be left to interpret it the way I prefer. Open questions, I suppose, rather than rhetorical questions from art.
Yeah, the way that you want to interpret it, not being told how, not being told how that piece of art is, but how you feel about the art, what the art means to you almost.
Yeah, sometimes with prosaic art as well, which is actually quite a nice way of describing it, is prosaic art. It's too simplified. I think I said earlier that it's the difference between an open question and leaving me to decide what the art is about or what it means, and a rhetorical question, which is there just to kind of prove some point. And I think the implication of prosaic art is that me, the enjoyer of art, or anybody who enjoys the art, is too stupid to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And so they've got to be handheld to the conclusion. That to me just seems against the point. It seems to be exploitative of creativity.
I suppose it all totally depends on your audience and that audience's interests. It's even, I think it's similar down to people's music taste. I think everybody has their own taste in music. Some people will stick specifically to one genre of music that might not interest a lot of people. So, like you say, like political art, there is an audience for that. It's never, like I said, any sort of creative thing, music, art, reading, like any sort, like your genre of books, it's never going to suit every type of audience because everybody is just so different. Everybody is so different that it's not going to attract everyone. I know that my art, the style of my art, it's very specific. So I can almost see the audience that would be attracted to my art. Like I can imagine them. I know what kind of thing they would be into. But yeah, I think it is broad with that though. Like same as books though. Books, poetry. Not everybody is going to be into that style of book or poetry. Music, of course.
Yeah, I have to admit that it's a completely personal comment to say that prosaic art is disinteresting. I still value and enjoy a lot of art that is or was intended to be quite, or to make some specific point. I mean, I really like Rage Against the Machine. They are a political band, and they're just the first one that comes to mind, but there's plenty of others. But I really enjoy that. But I think the thing that I enjoy is not really the message, which largely I completely ignore.
Yeah, of course.
There's a narrowing effect, isn't there?
Yeah.
If you are consciously making those decisions to put it in the music or to put it in the art, it does narrow.
I don't think it's ever something you should feel guilty about though for not. You wouldn't feel guilty if you didn't like a specific type of food. I think it is the same with anything like art. And of course, there's a creator behind that. But you can't help what you like. And there's definitely types of art that I'm not into. And I don't want to feel guilty for not liking it. So I'm not really into certain, like really minimalist art that are a bit like, as in like statues or models. That's not my genre of art. Like I would never go to an exhibition. Exhibition? That's right, isn't it? Exhibition, yeah. Like an art exhibition, yeah. Of say like your simple concrete blocked statues. It's not anything that would, if I'm honest, it would bore me to go view that. I wouldn't, because it doesn't cater to what keeps my mind working. It wouldn't make me question it. It doesn't leave me looking at the piece of art thinking, what is this effect on me? What am I thinking by looking at this art? So I think it's just the same. If you can't help what you like, so there's always going to be a genre of something that doesn't interest you.
It's interesting as well, because earlier we were saying about how there's this kind of shared experience with art and we like to leave it open for people to interpret it however they like. In earlier podcasts, I've said that it's almost as if art is conversational and there's a bit of a back and forth. I think in the context of what we were just talking about, when you would go to an art gallery or when I would listen to something that is intended to be political, it's interesting how each of us would shape that experience differently. For me, listening to Rage Against the Machine, I simply don't hear the message. I don't really hear the words so much as I hear the shape of the words.
You just enjoy the music.
Yeah, and the melody of the words and the shape and the sounds that the words have. The phonoaesthetics, they would call that. But I don't care too much for the semiotics, the meanings of the words. I just don't hear them unless I have to be really thinking a different kind of way about music. I don't enjoy it that way.
I think I'm actually along the same lines as you, definitely in music, because there's a lot of songs and a lot of like genres of music that I listen to that I couldn't actually tell you what they're about, but they'd be up there with some of my favorite songs. And if I actually sat down and listened and even read, like sometimes, like when I was younger, I used to be obsessed with like the music videos and reading the lyrics online. Like I can't remember what the website was for that, where all your lyrics would come up. But now there's definitely some of my favorite songs out there, and I could not tell you what that song's about just because I'm too engulfed in listening to it and just enjoying the experience of how it sounds for me. But I don't think I look into the lyrics that deeply ever with music. So I know obviously you're a musician. So you will probably analyze a song a lot more than I would. But when I'm listening to music, I just enjoy how it's making me feel.
No, I am the same as you with that regard. I think I could analyze it. I certainly have the skill set to be able to do that. I have a pretty good degree in music performance, so I could do that.
Yeah.
I just don't. I'm fairly casual with my enjoyment of music. I care about how it makes me feel, and that's how I go into writing it as well. I care about how it makes me feel, and little all else. I suppose taking it back to you and the sort of art that you create, how important is feeling to what you create? Is it similar to how you work with music or how you enjoy music?
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know, my art style's changed a lot. How I picked up my style of art was I've got such a from an age younger than I should have been obsessed with tattoos. I've always adored tattoos. The thought of I've always looked that is pretty much what got me into physical art and creating it. Even from them first few months of being at college, I almost knew straight away where I could see myself, where I wanted to be. I wanted to cover my body in art because I looked at it as a canvas. And looking deeper into that, I knew that I wanted to be a tattoo artist. Years down the line, that has totally, definitely, my opinion there has changed. I love tattoos. I still plan to cover my body in them. I have no intention now to be a tattooist. But my style that I picked up was definitely from creating art in the sense of a tattoo style almost. My work does look very like neo-traditional is the word for it. So it almost looks like traditional style tattoos, and I've just adapted it there, picking up skills along the way that adjusted it to look very much unique to my style. I've picked up a flair that to look at a piece of art, in my opinion, I would know if it were mine now, like for someone to see it. It's just got little accents that make it very much mine and not something that's already out there.
Yeah. Do you know much more about the accents? Could you describe them?
I do a lot of it's obviously mine's very block lined, it's bold outlining. And initially, because of personal only wanting black and white tattoos, like black and grayscale tattoos on my body, all of my art to begin with that I did like personally, so I work through Procreate on my iPad, so it's digital art. I never experimented with colors to begin with. All I did was block black and white art, and that was purely down to that was the style of art that I enjoyed looking at and I enjoyed on my body and seeing on other people's body. Like I enjoyed block, dark, not much shading, just dark art. That's definitely adapted over the years of me doing art. So my accents are still, I use a lot more color than I used to now, purely because I've picked up the skill to know how to work with them colors. I still keep throughout my art the black accents or even the color that I'd be doing the outlining in, and it's I almost double up on my lines. So like say on any corners of the art, I'd put an extra. I don't know how to describe it without you being able to see it. So it's almost like a corner.
Well, maybe give an example. There was a picture on your Instagram of a rat, a rice picking rat. Maybe you could tell us something about that.
So you can see like around the tail, anywhere on the outside of the drawing, there's extra lines, like just small details. So like around the very end of the tail, there'll be like a small triangle around it. And that's something that correlates through nearly every single piece of personal art that I will do. It's just they're what I would describe as my accents. So it's like extra.
Yeah, it's there on a lot of your work for Worship the Scent as well. It is there on that. I'd never noticed that before, but yeah, that is there.
That follows through with pretty much all of my personal ones or for Worship the Scent. If I'm being commissioned, I will usually do, if I do a few samples, like a few copies for them to choose from, I will always do one that has got my accents on, and then I leave it down to the person wanting the commission whether they want them in there. Because I would do, say, a version that doesn't have them as well, just because it's obviously their choice, they're paying for the work.
What do you think the role of those little flares are to the art? What is it about it that you think is making an improvement on the piece?
I don't know if it makes it a lot bolder for me. I don't know if it stands out more. Like even a recent one that I did, I've been experimenting with painting. So I've been using acrylic paints, and again, that was totally self-taught because I didn't learn it through school and I didn't use paint whilst in college. I even did it there, like around, and it was a style of art that I've not really done much of, and it would more natural looking. So it was like a leaf painting. So you've got like jungle leaves in there, because like cheese plants, a range of different leaves, and I still did it all the way around the leaves. And I think it almost, I want to say it adds a bit of an animation aspect to it, even on ones that I've done that are more realism. So the painting of the leaves is definitely more realism, but it's still got the bold black accents around all corners of the leaves and the vines.
I feel like it creates almost the illusion of movement.
Yeah.
Rather than it feeling
still
stationary and solid and still, yeah. But it's great. I mean, something I really like about these conversations is being able to pick up on these things that otherwise go unnoticed. I'm certainly a novice when it comes to thinking and observing, and I'm not very critical of the sort of work that you do, print, I suppose, and visual art. It's not an area I have expertise in, but I find it so interesting when people can point to something that is constant in the pieces that they've produced and say, I do this in fairly regularly. This is something, a stylistic choice that I impose on all of the artwork that I create. And I could have been, and usually I'm completely oblivious to that before they've told me. And I simply don't see it. It's almost as if it's in the subtext for me. I don't see it.
Yeah. I think it's almost like a signature for me on my art as well. Doing that almost is how I mark my art as mine. I think because you could almost, if some of the art that I've done, I know that if I didn't put them on, it could look very similar to art that is just already out there. So I don't know, that's just something that I picked up that followed through, that I always put on my art now. I think it is almost like a marking. It's like my signature in there without it being an actual signature.
It's a nice way of putting it as well, as a signature. I might keep that phrase. I like it. Could we go back to something you mentioned earlier, and it was how you used the word creative? So to give you the appropriate context here, is when we were talking about where creativity comes from, and you were describing how you in your family seem to be the one who is more creative than the others, despite mother being fairly expressive with the clothes that she wears and so on and so forth. I, by the way, deeply empathize with that, because I feel exactly the same. My parents particularly creative in the way that I think you and I are using the word.
Yeah.
They are fairly mundane in that regard. They don't do all that much. Although my mum more recently has started doing quite a lot of calligraphy and things like that. So I think if anything, I get it from my mum more than my dad. But in terms of music,
No. Yeah.
nowhere in sight. It doesn't seem to come from them. I think I have a piano player who was my great grandfather was a piano player, and somewhere further along the line in my family history and my family heritage was an opera singer, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So my question is, how are you using the word creative there when you talk about yourself as somebody who is more creative than other people? What does it mean to be a creative?
So on a personal level, back to family wise, I think a lot of my creativity, how I would word it, is because of, I don't know if I gained a lot of it or it was already there. I would definitely put it down to how I was brought up. Like I said, it was very open. I could express myself however I wanted. I felt very free. I didn't feel, how do I word it now? Growing up, I wasn't, I don't want to say oppressed to anything. I wasn't, my mum or my dad didn't push me to be in any sort of box. I was free to do whatever I wanted. So I guess they've got that almost open mind, which would make them, in a sense, a type of creativity, definitely. And like my dad loves gardening, but he doesn't, which I would say is creative. Like the way that he'd think to do something with his garden or whatever is something I probably wouldn't be able to just think up. So the creativity is there, but there's nobody that's shown like a specific skill. Like you say, there's been no musicians in my family, no particular artists. I know that my dad could draw, like sketch, but it wasn't anything that he had a passion for. So I don't know. Defining creativity for me is something that I'd say I've got a passion for it. I enjoy doing it. It brings me a lot of joy to produce art. So I don't know if that would put me in the category of why I would define myself as a creative.
Is there something else there maybe to do with your use of the word imagination compared to creativity? I think I would say that imagination is simply being able to create something, and creativity is generally what people mean when something has been created, when the imagination has been used.
Yeah, absolutely. So you like creative is definitely the output. So it's putting it down on paper or making the music, whatever your platform is to create. Your imagination is just an idea to begin with. For it to become a piece, you've got to create it. So I guess creating any sort of art, whatever genre that is, you've got to have you've got to have the imagination and the passion for it. So how my imagination works, like, I don't know. I start off by sketching a lot of my things, or it's just an idea. I'm very visual inside my head. I'll picture stuff. Even when I'm reading a book or whatever, I can imagine the exact thing in my head, or it's a whirlwind of different ideas flowing around my mind. But like physical things, like I can physically see them. Like I know I've done a sketch. It's in this. I've got a little notepad out on the table, and it's a backpack that I've turned into almost like a being. Like it is like a being. It's got eyes. It looks almost like it should be alive. And that I know that was something that I just sketched up from something that I'd imagined that was just there in my brain, and I had to put it on paper because it was just so wacky to imagine a backpack that was alive almost, which is, I think you've got to be a creative for something. Like I don't know if it's biased to put this out there, but I just can't imagine a maths teacher, for instance, that was very numeratic, into numbers, whatever, that kind of very intelligent in that sense. I just couldn't imagine somebody like that picturing a backpack coming to life. That's a very ridiculous example, but it's the easiest way for me to put it. Yeah. Like I know that that's such a wild thought to imagine. To put that on paper, I think you've got to have that style of imagination. And I think because everybody is so different, everybody's imagination would be so different to what they imagine and the genre of things that they're doing.
Yeah, I think with stereotypes, they do work sometimes.
Yeah,
You know, it is a stereotype, and you can't speak about an individual using it, really. It doesn't tell you all that much about a person that you're talking to, but it can tell you largely about an imagined person or an average from a group of people.
yeah,
It tells you something there, because it's a stereotype really is just it's like an underlying principle of a group. And so with math teachers, like you said, the stereotype there is that most people who've chosen to go into a career dealing with numbers don't spend all that much time thinking about
backpacks coming to
drawing
life.
in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sketching. It's
We were talking about imagination and creativity. And I think it's obvious to me that everybody has an imagination, although it might vary in degrees. Some people may be more imaginative than others. But is it as if a creative person is somebody who wants to make those ideas real?
yeah, definitely, absolutely. If for them, yeah, them for a creative person is somebody that would put those ideas, they turn them into something, they make it almost real. It's no longer just an idea or something that's in your mind. It's no longer an imagination. You've created something out of it. You've made something, whether that be music, of course, in my genre of art, what I do, it would be a post, a picture, an image, like a hand sketched piece, whatever, a print. But it's definitely something that it's got to start somewhere. And being a creative mind, it does definitely come from your imagination for me. I definitely use other platforms when I'm, say, if I've got an idea that I want, but it's not quite complete, my imagination can't fully finish it. I definitely would say I take inspiration from other places, whether that be like social media or Pinterest, other platforms that can definitely help, just almost creating a mood board to help your imagination work, to help it fully piece a piece together.
Well, it's your ideas aren't entirely your own, are they? Nobody's are, because you can't choose what ideas you have. They just appear, and they appear because of the environment you find yourselves in. So if you happen to be searching through social media and you see another post or some text, or you're out in the world and you're in a room that's a certain color, that's by design sometimes intended to make you feel a certain way, or you will think certain things differently to you would if you were somewhere else. So the ideas aren't, you almost don't have any choice of whether you have an idea or not.
No, absolutely. I think they're heavily influenced by things that you surround yourself with, your environment, and your own personal interests. Like I know that I create art that of art that does interest me. It's something that I know that I would like to go to like an exhibit of, or it's art that I would look for online, like similar, that genre, that style. So I create pieces that I know that I would like if they weren't mine, almost. So even just down to how it started for me getting into creating art, because I love tattoos. That's where I started off from scratch, no skill base. I was designing things that I would like to put on my own body almost. And don't get me wrong, to begin with, I look back at some of the first pieces of art I did, and I could almost laugh at them now. And they're still great, and I still love them because it's where I started. But being able to now have that confidence to look at my art and the progress of how much it's improved, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the difference there is in a creative person and a non-creative person is the urge to create. And a non-creative person seems to either not have it, or to want to ignore it, or to find it bothersome in some way. Whereas I find that urge quite overbearing sometimes, to the point where if I don't do something with it, say it's sit on the piano and write something, or sing an idea of a song or a melody that I've got that's haunting me at the moment into my phone, or for you, maybe to
Quickly
put,
sketch it.
put to paper, to quickly sketch it. If I don't do that, it will persist.
It niggles at your brain. Yeah, it almost picks away at you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it won't leave me alone. So I just get stuck. It's as if I'm being held back by not addressing that.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to define creative and imagination. And I don't think many people spend all that much time laboring over the choice of words.
The difference in meaning for me, obviously, it's down to personal. Like you say, it's hard to define them. But in how it works in my brain would be your imagination for me is block simple down to it's an idea, and creativity for me is the creating of it. That's how I differentiate it. Being a creative, you're producing something. Everybody's got an imagination to ponder up an idea.
It's hard to imagine somebody saying that this person is a creative person based on them having never created anything. They may well be a creative person, but if they never actually take the time to create something, it's very difficult for us as casual observers of their or adjudicators of their creative ability to say yes, this person is a creative person, but we have no way of knowing. I think there's a kind of naturally leads to the question of the final product of the imagination. How much art do you think you should be creating, or does it matter?
I think it's definitely something that I used to probably overbear my thoughts with, that I wasn't creative enough, because not even creative enough or creating enough art. And I definitely used to beat myself up about it, because a lot of my friends that I surround myself with are also artists. They're also create. Is that back? I don't know if my camera went off then, if you lost me. But a lot of my friends, they're also artists, and watching them produce so much art, but you can't put yourself in their shoes. So I was only seeing it from my perspective and putting all this out there, which then made me question myself of that I wasn't creating enough art. But by doing that, it definitely put me into a block where I didn't create anything for months and months and months, because I would just beat myself up about it too much. So it almost put that block there, like you would say, like a writer's block. It put that there for me to be able to create anything, because I was so fixated on the obsession of I wasn't creating enough art, or so it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel organic at the time. So I don't think I try not to focus on that anymore. I definitely don't pin any like time frames or this is what I should be doing. I'm not doing this enough. I let it flow naturally now. I create like personal art or art that I put out there. It's just almost, when I feel like it, when on them days where I'm just feeling more ready and I want to, because I've got to enjoy it. If I'm not enjoying when I'm creating art, then like I say, it's just not organic for me. I don't want to put it out there. It feels incomplete, or it feels almost fake of me to do it. I don't like it. So I've got to be in that.
What's the role for quantity and quality then for you?
So definitely quality over quantity. So I might work on one piece. Like I've got a piece on this on my Procreate on the iPad that's still incomplete, and it's one of the first pieces that I did on there, and I still love that piece of art, and I know that one day I'll put it out there when it's finished. But the quality of it's just not quite there yet, and I've produced like so many more pieces of art since starting that one, but I refuse to continue with a piece of art if I've lost the connection with it at that time. And I know that it will come back to finish that, but I don't want to I don't want to force myself to finish a piece if it's not natural, if it doesn't again feel organic to continue with that piece. If I've lost like my trail of thoughts, like if I've gone off on one, so it's no longer there, I'll stop doing it, just so that I do not ruin the piece, but finish it in a way that I know deep down I don't want to leave it like that, or it's not the way I can imagine it being.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just a point to be made about taste, and you perhaps setting the bar quite high for the work that you're willing to put out into the world. I feel the same. I have pieces of music and ideas that are maybe a decade old that I still haven't figured out what to do with yet. And I still love something in the idea. And I know there's more that I could be done with it, but I just can't
figure out what that
it's
is.
as if I can't yeah, I can't push through, say, in terms of music for me, say I'm getting to a pre-chorus and I'm like, everything so far has been great, and I just can't quite get the lift into a chorus. I just can't do it. And it's almost as if um, a good example is at the moment I've been writing a lot of music after maybe not writing anything for about 4 years or so. And I've returned to older songs that I had started all these years ago, and since found that I've been able to work on them and have new ideas and flesh it out and make finished songs out of them. And so I wonder whether it's just that I can't force myself to grow enough in a short space of time, and I have to have 4 years of personal change before I can do the justice to the song. And it's not just skills, but me as a person, for me to be the vessel for those ideas. Have you had an experience like that, would you say?
Yeah, down to them. Like there's more than one, but the one piece that I have on my mind that's incomplete. I know that it's something that will go not over a period of time of like 4 years, probably. Yeah, like 2 3 years. I've been doing this one piece, and I know for a fact now, speaking honestly, I have not touched it in maybe 4 months, 5 months, because I don't have the imagination that I did at the time or that is needed for me to continue with that piece. And I
Yeah.
think my moods heavily affect the output of the style of art that I do. So if I'm not in a similar mood to when I started that piece, then I can't put in that style of art, that work ethic that is there for it. Like it's I don't want to say it's a dark piece, but it almost looks, it's a little bit demonic looking, and not at all that I have demonic moods, but I would probably, and because it's been that long since doing it, I was probably in a place that I haven't been for a while, or that I know that I'm not right now. And it does definitely reflect in a lot of my artwork. I've started using a lot more color, and I think that's because I'm in such a happy, healthy place with myself and mentally, that I can't finish that piece of work, and I need to essentially find a way around it, that I don't need to essentially be in a
Mm.
dark place to finish a dark piece of art. And not that that would necessarily be portrayed in the art, you wouldn't know that to look at it, but I do as an artist. So I just, as the producer of that piece of art, I couldn't finish it right now, and I know that I can't.
Yeah, it's something like learning how to simulate a feeling without identifying with it or becoming it.
Becoming it, exactly. I would not want that to absorb me.
Yeah, I know a lot of people say that their best work, I suppose this is true of me actually, some of my best music was written when I was most miserable.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard for me to write good music when I'm spending a lot of time, practically all of my time, focusing so intently on making myself not miserable. It's a full-time pursuit for me.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to not just fall into despair and suffering. And I use that in the Buddhist sense of the word, not the more literal sense of it, but suffering in a way that I mean negative experience. I have a natural inclination to fall into that, and so I have to work very hard to make sure that I don't. And I've got quite good at that over the last decade or so, and I'm quite good at setting up routines and habits and ways of living that are conducive to good well-being and good health. But that means that has had a impact on my ability to create art that I think is good enough to do something
Yeah,
with.
absolutely.
It's a question of whether I'm willing to put myself through something immiserating, and it's hard.
Or find a way to get around it.
Yeah, I'm unwilling to do it. I'm unwilling to sacrifice my health to do it. But I do think there is a way, given this kind of conversational nature of creation, that I can put myself into a state that's almost an illusion. It's a self illusion, by going into maybe a room that's a different color or in a different place or has a different smell, or even now, in the middle of a pandemic, I have found that the social environment has made me more creative because it is quiet. serious and it is anxiety provoking, and that provocation has affected my mental well-being. I find I have more low days than I usually would, but the parallel to that is that I find it much easier to sit down at the piano or on my iPad, where on GarageBand, where I do all my writing, to produce or develop ideas that I've had where in the past I just have an idea and then don't do anything with it because I don't have the inclination to. Do you think then, the question follows, do you think that good art can be created from good health?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, because it just, I don't like to, I don't know how to word it. My art varies so much. I think my mood is very not obvious to the viewer, but to me, I could, if I laid out a lot of pieces of art that I've done, I would be able to pinpoint, maybe not exactly, but the kind of mood and how I feel in how my life was playing out at that time and how I was feeling to look at it. Like, I know that a lot of my art that I'm doing currently is very colourful, it's flamboyant, and I think that has got a lot to do with my lifestyle now and how much I've accepted myself and who I am to some of the older pieces. But I'm still so happy and proud of the pieces that I've currently done. But just as much as I am with the pieces that I did that I still think are great, but I know that at the time, my headspace and physical and maybe even mental health were not where they should be. But I would not ever forfeit how I feel now, my physical and mental health being how it is, to produce art like that. I'd love to be able to produce that again, just without the mental side of it that produced it, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to be in a dark place to have to create that art. And for that reason being, I would, like I say, I'd put my health and mental health well before an outcome of art. I know that I can create a different style and a different piece of art and it'd be just as good, but it doesn't come with the overbearing pain and anxieties that did with other good pieces of art.
I don't get the sense that for either of us, raw emotion or untamed emotion is enough to create good art. I think it's good enough to stimulate it, and it's good enough to ensure that, or to continuate it and ensure that it's actually created in the first place. But we haven't said too much about skill. And for me, skill is another way of looking at art, because skill is to do, it has something to do with your understanding of your own ability, and it is a case of being able to put your emotions, make detail to your emotions, I would say, rather than just leaving them unspoken and messy and loud and obnoxious. Kind of taming them and making sense of them. Maybe this is just the same parallel relationship that the brain hemispheres had that we mentioned earlier in the conversation. And it's, the skill is like the left hemisphere. It's like the understanding, the verbal understanding of the thing that you're doing, whereas the right hemisphere is the raw emotion. And if you want to create something good, something valuable, then there does need to be some harmony between the two hemispheres and between skill and emotion.
I think sometimes, like, I know that I've done it myself. Like, you look at a piece of art and it can be so polished and beautiful looking, or even like music, and you don't think about the skill that's gone into it until you're producing it yourself, like your own. Like, again, it comes with that battle of you've got to learn how to do it and you've got to bear with it. I think that art, it is something that can be taught, but if you don't have the passion there, if you don't have the time that you want to put into it, you're never going to be a creator of that style. You've got to want to do it. I compared it, when I was speaking to a friend earlier, I compared it to something as simple, or even like an athlete. They might already have that genetic there, that they're amazing at this kind of thing. They might have a background of a sporty family, so it's there. But if they haven't got that passion for it, they're probably never going to get as good as they want to be. So which is why I enjoy doing my art, because the passion is there for it. So I put the time in, I put the effort in to pick up these new skills and learn along the way. And there's so many hurdles that you have to go over whilst doing that. But if that passion wasn't there, you'd be tempted to just give up. The first hurdle you get to that you can't overcome, give up, and that's it. So I think that's where it comes down to it almost, I don't know if being genetic, being creative, having that spark for it. But I think that passion, that genetic that is possibly there, is something that it pushes you through that barrier.
There's a strident familiarity there for me with how you're talking about the creative process, and most people's, including mine, my own history with trying to go to the gym and trying to stay fit. And there's a difference between motivation and habit. And I might have the motivation to go every now and then, and so I'll go. But more often than not, I don't. So I have to structure and habitualize going to the gym, which is a bit more difficult, but I have to pay attention to that. And it's perfectly achievable for me to go to the gym regularly, but it's so much harder because I'm not motivated to do it. Outside of this conversation, I've said many times on record that I think motivation's fundamentally useful, but 9 times out of 10, people don't take it for what it is, which is just something to give you the desire to do something. It's a signal to say, hey, this thing is important right now. But it's not what you should rely on to do those things. And so if I was the sort who wanted to create music more often than I do, I would probably have habits in place so that it made it more likely that I did them rather than rely on the motivation. In the same way that I would do with anything else, going to the gym, wanting to make sure that I brush my teeth or drink enough water through the day. Any of those things, I usually set up quite strict routines and start getting it into a habit. I would say the difference there between those things is that creating a habit about writing music and something as personal and subjective as about, such as writing music or creating any art really, is that sometimes that can inhibit the final product, which kind of echoes what you've already said. But how do you fit in routines for art? Do you ever do that? Do you kind of have in place like, I want to create this, and so this is the routine. I go through step 1, step 2, steps 3, step 4, and then the work is done. Do you keep that in place, or is it kind of free to move wherever it likes every time you work on something?
I think it totally depends on the scenario of art I'm producing. So I'm a lot more strict with it, say when it's a commission. So if I'm doing any work for Worship the Scent or commissions just from people personally, I definitely try and follow more of a structure because I won't fall off the wagon when I'm doing that. I would give myself not too much of a strict time. Well, the owner, Joe of Worship the Scent, he tends to put a strict time schedule in for me, which is usually a day. So that tests me. That definitely almost challenges me, which I don't mind. I do enjoy that. But and then I've got a process that I will follow when doing commissions like that. So a start off would be like doing a base sketch, really, really rough. So I wouldn't stick with that. I don't have to concentrate on it too much. And then the layering of the final outcome is added to it. There's definitely a structure and a step-by-step there for that. But when it's personal art, like just something I'm producing, say for Instagram, or just for myself, for prints, anything like that, it's a lot more free flowing. So the piece that I've said that's incomplete, that we're not done for any other reason other than personal. I just want it, and it's natural. I let that flow. So I think the habit is there for a structure when it's something that isn't just for me. I think the care there is, I know that this is for somebody else, so it's got to be, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. I don't know. I just want it to be a lot more almost formal, put together so that I'm happy with it. And I know that to keep it professional almost, to keep it so it is definitely going to be right for the audience.
It's a little bit like what we spoke about earlier when I said about, I used the word prosaic art, and I was using that term to describe art that's a bit more contrived, which I don't mean in a pejorative sense. I just mean that it's more thought out first. There's a point to the art before you begin. Like you're starting with this is what it's for. Whereas I think something personal, you don't start with what it's for. You start with the urge to do it and let it unfold, and you figure out what it's for somewhere along the way.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I definitely learned through trial and error whilst when I first started creating. It were a constant battle in my head that I did start with an idea of this is what I expect it to be at the end. And then I would beat myself up when it got to the end and it isn't what I thought it would be. And that was something that I slowly had to like talk myself out of, that I don't need to do that, which is now why I think I am so confident and happy with the art that I produce, because I just let it happen. But something that I definitely think I struggle with, and I think it'd be interesting to know if other artists have the same struggle, like even with you, like when you're writing your music, when I'm doing a piece of art and I'm so happy with it and all the way through, it's great, it's going how I want, I struggle when to stop. It's hard for me to know when to put the pen down and be like, this is finished. Because when I'm just so happy with it, I'm like, it needs more. But sometimes more is definitely too much. That's something that I know that I'm still learning to overcome, of knowing when to stop with a piece of art and when it is finished.
This is something I wanted to get to anyway, so I'm glad we kind of got there organically. And it's to do with taste and aesthetics and how people judge when something is good, I think. So you were saying that you sometimes struggle with knowing when to stop. When you aren't struggling to know that, how do you know when to stop?
I don't even know how to answer that. I don't know if it's just that voice inside your head of like, this is finished. And I think it's the confidence of knowing that it's finished. Like, and I definitely know that I have that more so again with commissions, with work, say I am doing for Worship the Scent or just other customers. I think it's a lot more, it's less clouded in my brain. I think when they've given me an idea, they know what they're wanting. I can create it and I've ticked the boxes almost. They're done for them. I know that it's ready. I'll obviously speak with them afterwards, be like, is this right? Any changes? I'd then make them adjustments if there were any. So I think the knowing when to stop, for me, I can't answer that question. My brain's almost clouded when it comes to personal art. And I'm producing something for myself and just for other people to enjoy looking at, for knowing when to, I don't know when to stop when it's just a personal piece of art, because like you say,
you use the word confidence, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that. There's definitely something there. I think when a person is more confident in the final piece, they're more likely to say it's done. And I think you're more likely to have confidence in a piece of work if you've already been told what it is for and what it's about. And with something personal, because you don't get given that in the get-go and you have to figure it out along the way, it means you don't have access to that confidence until much later in the process. So I think there's something there. I think you've got something there. I think that actually brings us to quite a natural end. I'm judging when to end there. I'm judging when to stop. I've developed that. Let's wrap it up there. We've been going about an hour, but this has been absolutely joyous. Where can people find your artwork?
On Instagram, that is my only platform currently that I use, and it is Inktinkboy. That is my art page, design page. I am open to commissions, anything like that, but also just check it out, see what you think of it, and let me know. I'm always open to feedback. I think that's something that's great to hear. It gives you a nice confidence boost, or it's good to hear what people's opinions are on your art, and I definitely like giving my opinion on it, so I definitely reciprocate that. Feel free to comment or give me a message.
A sharpening of the final product, I think. Criticism, that's how I consider it. It's sharpening a sword. It's analogous to that. This has been really good though, so let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Until then,